Hi, everybody, and welcome to Zevo's February webinar. We're going to talk about how content moderators can avoid being overwhelmed, but at the same time staying informed. And today I'm delighted to introduce the wonderful Anne Gleeson, who is a wellbeing specialist at Zevo and works with many of our customers. Anne, you're very welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Tara. Good to be here.
Great. So, Anne, before we get into it, maybe tell us a little bit about your role and the kind of work you do with the content moderators.
Yeah, so my role is a wellbeing specialist. So I would work with various people who work in content moderation. I do lots of different things. I would provide therapeutic settings, so one-to-one settings for them. I would provide training, psychoeducation on different aspects of their well-being and mental health with regard to the work that they do. So I would also facilitate kind of peer group sessions so that they can connect with their colleagues. And it would vary then. I would work online with people and I would be on site with people as well. So I'm kind of doing a lot of different things, you know.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So today we're talking about how to, while staying informed, not to get overwhelmed. And I was saying this to Anne last week when we were preparing for this. We did a lot of recording of new content last year in December that is going to go live on the platform soon. But one of the pieces was how you protect your worldview. And I suppose I want to get into the challenge for content moderators. We know from their work that they're sitting potentially in front of egregious content. And even when it's not egregious, it's continuous, scams or whatever that is. How do you make sure how do you help them make sure they avoid that saturation and burnout?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tricky one for a number of different reasons. Firstly, because like the nature of the role of content moderation is so specific, and that will mean that there are very specific challenges to the role, and really those people who are sitting in front of those laptops, not only are they experiencing potentially egregious content, there is the overload of it as well. So there's kind of saturation of information, and people could be working with different things that are connected to them personally, culturally, politically, all those things. So really the people who work in content moderation do a really, really tough job because they are privy to a corner of the online world that a lot of people will not be aware of, they'll not see. They could go through their entire lives without having kind of any knowledge or experience about it. So naturally enough, there is that kind of like immersive nature of the work. So if you think about that and couple that with the need to be aware of what's going on in the world and the need to be informed as well as to what's going on, they really do straddle a divide there whereby they there needs to be a balance in the risk of burnout, the risk of vicarious trauma, the risk of compassion fatigue, and also wanting to know what's going on in the world and wanting to be educated and wanting to really be advanced in their knowledge of what's going on in their particular area of the world, or something that is close to them, or that they're kind of socially active about. So it's not about this kind of toxic positivity stuff about good vibes only, all that kind of stuff. It's about making space for all of the different parts of their working day or their working shift. So, really where you start with that is being realistic about the nature of the work, being realistic about it from like the commonalities of the work and also down to the specifics of each person, what their own lived experience is like each day and how that can change each day as well. And also, being intentional with the care that they need to provide for themselves. Like we talked last week about the idea of self-care and how the phrase self-care can get thrown around a bit, and everybody thinks, oh, lovely bubble baths, face masks,
Absolutely.
cucumber slices on the eyes. I mean, all of that is great, yes, but like self-care takes a lot of shapes. So if we look at it specific to the role of a content moderator, and then you break it down even further, and you look at self-care with regard to a content moderator who's trying to stay abreast of things and trying to stay informed while also needing to be immersed in this world. And you know yourself as well, like when you are working, work is a bubble. No matter what it is, no matter what industry you're in, you are really, really immersed in it. And that's only compounded by the urgency that we will experience in lots of different ways. You know, the expectations, our roles, our responsibilities, like our own experience within it as well, and our purpose in it. So if you're thinking about that, mixed with the experience of having to deal with all of this challenging stuff, having to deal with, being immersed in this world, and also having that awareness. If you want to like bring it back to that, having that awareness of the ugly side of the online world and the disturbing side and
Yeah,
the worrying side and all that kind of stuff. You know, you really do need to be intentional with how you provide yourself with that care. So what I'm saying really with that is, you know, we can often leave ourselves as an afterthought. We can often
yeah,
think, yeah, I'll get to my self-care now next week when I have a bit more time. I just need to do this, and this. I need to get that done for this person. I need to get to the end of this queue. I need to get to that project finished. But like, there will always be something, you know, like there will always be something that I can just get done, or I will need to get
of
that
course.
done first. So that needs to be staple within
Yeah.
the days and within the structures as well. And that in itself can be a tricky part of the process as well, you know?
Yeah, and you're talking about the kind of bubble in work, and you've got the queue, you've got, you're usually working in a team, and you don't want to let other
Mm-hmm.
people down and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So if I'm sitting in one of those, as a content moderator, if I'm sitting there thinking about how I bring that intentionality to my self care, give me some ideas about how I could add that to a very important part of my to do list. Because
Mm-hmm.
the conversation we had last week is, which really resonated with me because I've been doing a lot of in the mornings, reading a lot of stuff from America overnight to keep
Mm-hmm.
myself informed of what's happening with the D&I initiatives and all that kind of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
it was really ruining my mornings because
I bet.
it was constant of what's happening. And
Mm.
so I definitely switched out after I spoke to you about that. The time of the day I read it, the amount I read it, and then what I do after that to kind of feel like I have some kind of agency over how that impacts my life. So if for everybody, but especially for the content moderators listening, how do I bring that intentionality into my days of self
Mm-hmm.
care?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know what? I think that there needs to be a conversation or like an internal reflection around boundaries and about what those boundaries might look like throughout your day. And also, even to take that a step back, to give yourself permission to have boundaries, to know that your life is different from maybe the people that you are friends with outside of
Yeah,
work. Maybe it's very different from your partner and your family. So you need to be really realistic about what you have to do throughout the day and what impact that is. So like as you described there, like reading all the news overnight, you definitely get that heaviness, and
yeah,
like you get that sense of powerlessness as well, and helplessness. So how do you mind those boundaries then when it comes to having to look at that stuff with your work? And simple is always best when it comes to boundaries, right? And like it's so funny, I would always say, like when I'm working with clients, I would always say the stuff that we say, it goes without saying, we need to say it because we need to hear ourselves saying it. We need to say it to somebody else. We need to be able to kind of put it out into the air, put it out into the environment. So breaking up the day, and breaking up the day in a way where you are disconnected physically, mentally, and emotionally as well. Because I would hazard a guess, Tara, and say you've worked over lunch, or you've sat at your laptop while you've been eating your
Of
grub
course.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's not disconnection. Yes, we are like technically eating our lunch, but we are not allowing ourselves to step away to engage in something that is completely different, to to have peace, to have solitude, to do something where we're engaging in joy, in silliness, in fun, all those different things. And little and often really, really helps us with that. So like, take your breaks sounds like a very platitudinal, is that even a word? It sounds like a
Yeah.
platitude.
Yeah, exactly.
With that, but it depends on how intentional we are with what is the meaning of the break and what we need from that break. So stepping away from your laptop, like going for a little walk, calling a friend, having a game, something like that, where you are allowing like mind, body, and soul to be able to say, okay, this is my time. I
Hmm.
know that I'm engaged in something that maybe is on a deadline. There's an urgency to it. However, I need to sustain myself. And I sustain myself by creating these boundaries, by sticking to them, and by engaging in spaces that are good for me. We're the expert in our own lives by way of experience. So what provides me with joy might be different to the next person, but I am able to make that choice. I'm able to decide what that is. So really allowing yourself to have those breaks little and often. There may be that tendency to push through. I even hate that phrase, because even like viscerally that gives you a real feeling of dragging and
Yeah.
burning out. It's not
Yeah.
good, because there'll always be the next thing. When you get something over the line, then you're on to the next
Of
line, and
course.
that needs to be brought over. So being very consistent with those breaks, and sustaining yourself by properly resting. There's lots of different types of rest that we can engage in, but having that, and also trying to work with those feelings of potential feelings of guilt around taking breaks for yourself, stepping away. Maybe it's the case that everybody is, if you're working on site, everybody's sitting in and having lunch together, but yourself, I just need to go by myself. I need to go
Yeah.
out. I need to take a
Yeah.
walk. I need to just be away from work, me. And that's something that's really, really huge with that restorative process. So, like we talk about being intentional, we need to be intentional with that stuff. And we
Yeah.
need to know that it needs to be consistent with that. And like, I would look at that as your task as well. On the sometimes it feels like endless lists of tasks, but like, that is something, if you are working in content moderation, breaks, rest, distraction, connection to something else, finding those moments or pockets of joy, and really kind of like making yourself more and more buoyant so that you can keep going. We can
Very
often,
good.
feel like it's an afterthought, feel like, I will get to the break in time, but like, when is that time?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
yeah, simple as best with that stuff.
And as well as the egregious content, or even if it's non-egregious, it can be very draining to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
They also have the everyday stuff that all of us had about. I've had a
Yeah.
row with my boss, or I have unrealistic deadlines, or I'm having a row with at home, or whatever
Mm.
that is, that you're also bringing into your day to day. So it's there's normal kind of discussions and normal work stuff that's going on anyway, and
Mm-hmm.
personal stuff that's going on anyway, that you're
Yeah.
bringing in that you need to take care of too.
Of course. Yeah, of course. I mean, like, this always reminds me of a wonderful lecturer I had in college. We got into the habit of saying that we would park that when we came into the class, or, that perhaps a client came in and parked such a thing. And I remember this lecturer would say, you cannot park anything. We
No,
cannot just lift parts of ourselves and say, okay, well, I'm having an issue in my relationship. I'm just going to leave that outside the door. Not the case. I mean, how relieving and amazing would that be if we could do that for a temporary
absolutely.
basis?
Yeah,
But it's just not realistic. So we
yeah,
are all parts. We are bringing all parts of ourselves
yeah,
to every situation. And also, like, we're not a blank slate either. So everything that is part of our own story, so that will be to do with our own experiences. Now, like I am not a fan of the term baggage. I think it's quite antiquated. I think
Yes,
it's realistic that everybody has baggage,
of course.
huge air quotes here,
Mm,
but that just means we have a history, we have experiences that stick with us. We will have, our own perspective on the world because of our story and because of our history and our experiences. So we're bringing that all the time, as well as, like you say, those organizational issues
sure.
that are par for the course as well. Because, if you are in a group setting, in a space of urgency, if you're doing very, very tough and challenging work, and also very important work, it's very serious work. So it's not frivolous
Absolutely.
stuff, so all of these different spaces that you're engaging in, there is the potential to have a difficulty or a miscommunication. So, we have to allow space for that as well. We have to allow space to be impacted by that, because at the end of the day, we're all human, the same as, if you're a content moderator listening and you are expecting yourself to be desensitized or not bothered, or my pet peeve of a phrase is just to get over things. We don't get
Oh,
over things, we move
yeah,
through them. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
But, if you have that expectation of yourself to just know what to do and to just naturally find this balance, or to feel as if it's an issue with yourself, that you're struggling with this, or that your worldview has changed, or that you're feeling that fear about it changing, or you're feeling overwhelmed. We need to come back to the fact that anything that we're doing, we're human first,
yeah,
and then we engage in the world, and we need to make space for all of those parts. Yeah, and no matter like how good we think we are at parking things, we'll go back to my lecturer who
yeah, yeah.
said it's just not possible to
No.
do that. So we don't need to be holding those unrealistic expectations for ourselves, especially when we are engaging in a space where we need to be as compassionate as possible with ourselves. We need to rely on support, and we need to really kind of be patient and have that open mindset to check in on ourselves on a regular basis. Because if we are, like, even if you think about the term balance, it changes all the time, right? So
Of
we need
course.
to be checking in on that, and we need to allow for change with that. So we need to allow for discomfort and struggle and all those things, because if we're pretending that everything's okay, we're not guiding ourselves or seeking that guidance where we can be directed in the right way, where we can help ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And so the one of the things that we talked about before is that if you're starting to, so what do I notice as a content moderator that things are getting a little bit overwhelming? Is it that I start to think the world is broken, everything is wrong, all people are bad because I'm seeing so much of this? Like, when do
Mm.
I recognize that that balance is tipping where I need to take care of myself?
There's a few things that we
Yeah,
can do in a consistent manner as well. We talk about being intentional. So, engaging in care spaces is something that can really reflect back to us what's going on for us. So, we start with ourselves, and it's just to say as well, like, it's not just down to ourselves to look after things and to fix, and more huge air quotes here. If I could do them bigger, I would, but to fix things.
yeah,
It's not about that. It's about having that space where we check in with ourselves, help ourselves, but also take the help and seek the help that will be available in different resources and different options. So a great place to start is always change. So if I am noticing a change in myself, could be gradual, it could be something that's very subtle, but like I say, we are expert in our own lives by way of experience. So noticing perhaps if there's a change in our like ability to seek out joy in the world, if there's a change in how we like relate to the world as well, if there's a change in a good sounding board for us. Not that we want to be like 100% relying on external review or perception of ourselves. But if you have 1, 2, 3 people in your life that you trust, that know you well, that have your best interests at heart, that you feel safe and comfortable enough to have a very vulnerable and authentic conversation, and maybe not even a conversation, a dialogue. So it's ongoing about what your experience is and what perhaps they have noticed with you. If you aren't starting to notice that change, just to have that space where, you know, it's not something that will be a kind of a flippant thing. It's something that's said with care. Always useful as well to engage in dialogue, let's say with a mentor. It could be a colleague or a manager, somebody who has that shared experience of what it is like to work in content moderation, and perhaps a mental health professional as well. But, you know, there is something around, again, being consistent with knowing that you need the balance. When you are immersed in that world, when your corner of the world is potentially impactful, if we're not allowing for that stepping away, or that ability to see that there is more and there can be more in my world, that balance piece is something that's like, I can't stress enough how important that is for somebody that's working in content moderation, to have the time to explore what is meaningful for them in their world. That can be, you know, the silliness, that can be bucket list stuff. That doesn't need to be big, huge things, climbing mountains or whatever. I always use that analogy because I couldn't think of anything worse. But for myself, that wouldn't necessarily be very meaningful to me, but I find my meaning elsewhere. You know, so that's something that, so we're not taking away from the fact that there is worry, that can be overwhelmed naturally, because information is just limitless these days. But we also really kind of open our eyes to expanding and creating space for the good and the joy and the contentment and all those things that can really bring that balance about, and say, I know that this is happening, but I also know that I can cultivate these other pieces of my life as well.
And the thing that I find really interesting with the work content moderators do is that they don't have the ability to necessarily go home to their family and go, oh, you won't believe what I've seen today, or you won't believe what I did today, because of NDAs and all that kind of stuff. So talk to me about the need for community with this role.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's such a unique position that people are in, and it is one that is self-contained because of the need for privacy within the work. So it's very, very difficult even to give people a sense of what it is that you do, because it's so specific, it's so intricate, and you know, it is something where there's not necessarily very much a like for like out in the world with other roles, let's say, you know.
Absolutely. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it out there.
Yeah, exactly that. So the shared experience within that setting is hugely vital for that sense of community. So building up that structure within your own environment, that means that you will, you know, have space to connect with colleagues, that you will also have what's known as psychological safety, so you will feel comfortable to speak openly without fear of negative consequence, so that your world as such in there is a safe space, that you are able to authentically communicate your experiences, be able to have conversations around concerns or issues, and to be able to speak very openly and truthfully about challenges and struggles that you're having, so that you can progress, so that you can grow, and most importantly, that you are safe within that space. So that's something that needs to come from an organizational perspective. That comes from being modeled as well. So it's walking the walk and not just talking the talk. And you can feel the difference in that. But really, it is that understanding of the importance of community within that. Like, as humans, we need community because it has meant survival. We need belonging, acceptance. And when there is that shared understanding, there is that safety in that piece as well. So it is about, like, like making space for that, while also, you know, having to like oversee all of the needs, like the targets, the productivity, all that kind of stuff. So that would be kind of like from an organizational or from a managerial perspective, that we're tending to the reality of the experience for people, you know?
Yeah, and one of the things that I notice is that when I'm talking to different generations, there's a different generational language around taking care of ourselves or whatever. And my kids are Gen Z, and they would have a much better sense of when they need to give themselves time away, or
Mm-hmm.
they need to do something fun, or they need to watch videos of kittens because they've had a tough day.
Yeah.
Whereas other generations, I think, are a lot less. They don't give themselves, they don't allow themselves to do that because, to your point, they hear the voice in their head of you just get on with this, and you deal with
Mm.
that later or at the weekend on my own time. Are,
Mm-hmm.
are you seeing are you seeing different generations better able to deal with this, or is everybody dealing with the same stuff?
Do you know what? You definitely do see that difference. And like I think it's absolutely wonderful that the language of care, the language of our own well-being is so much more common and so much more like it's normalized more so
Absolutely.
now. And you know, younger people, yeah, I can say that because I'm in my 40s. The
Yeah,
youth of
yeah.
today
Yeah, 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 exactly.
can really speak up about their limits, because I mean the reality is no matter what generation you're coming from, everybody has limits and everybody has needs. It doesn't mean that you're not good at your job if you have limits. It doesn't mean that you're needy if you have needs. We need to be mindful of like showing up in a way that's safe and healthy and meaningful for us. So you can see that difference generationally, where there is that ability to speak up about
Yeah,
the need for boundaries, the need for a rest, and also there is that there seems to be that like you're starting with that internal understanding of this is my mental health. It's really important. I know that this is being impacted. I can sense the difference, rather than, let's say, people of older generations that would put themselves to the side. You know,
yeah,
there is typically from certain genders as well, there can be
absolutely.
expectations, especially from a generational point of view of, let's say, you know, the kind of the motherly figure being the martyr, or,
Yeah,
you know, needing to put everybody else ahead. Whereas we need to be filling our own cup in order to be able to provide and show up and do the work needed. There's no two ways about it. Like we need to
mm,
be able to restoring ourselves at all times. And often there can be those traditional gendered roles with men as well, where they
yeah.
need to just be
Get on
strong and
with it and
silent,
be strong. Yeah,
get
yeah.
on with it, yeah,
Mm,
figure it out themselves, not seek help. Whereas, you know, with all of that, and this is what the great thing about the youth of today, the younger generations, they really know the meaning of community and of allowing themselves to be held at times, because we all need that. And the original concept of self-care involved community. It wasn't just about, hey, listen, if you have an issue, you need to take care of it yourself, or, you
yeah,
know, don't be afraid to sort things out, or what I'm being for sort of glib with that. But,
I know what
you
you mean.
know, the idea of self-care involves community, because it
Mm,
means that we are taking care of ourselves so that we can show up in a meaningful way to help others, and we can be helped as well. So it's reciprocal in
mm,
that sense. But yeah, like I could definitely take a leaf out of their book as well, those the younger people, because I am a person that like I'm a psychotherapist, and I would truly to my core know the importance of this stuff. But you know, I have a tendency as well to sort of be the martyr or to leave myself to the side. So
yeah,
I need to be realistic about that as well. And that in and of itself is human as well. So
yeah, yeah.
for those
Which
people
is
who
really
are
important.
engaged, yeah, for sure. For those people who find it difficult to put themselves first, know that you're human, and be compassionate with yourself. And this stuff is a practice. We don't just flick a switch and
Absolutely.
and tend to our own needs. It's we build it up over time, but it comes from that realization that yes, this is important for me and for others.
Very good. One of the things that we've had some questions about from content moderators is when the policy that they have to enforce goes against their personal beliefs, opinions. I mean, the Israeli-Palestine piece is the obvious example, but there's
Hmm.
examples that we hear from people all the time, right? That they
Yeah.
don't agree with the policy, and it's not even agreement; it goes against a core value that they have, and
Hmm.
how they take care of that core value while doing the job, right?
Hmm.
How can we help them do that?
Hmm. This is a huge piece, and it's a really, really important piece, and a very, very sensitive one
Yes,
as well.
of course.
This is something where, like, I talk about the importance of community. This is something where we need to be held, right? We need to have that consistent provision of support, guidance, that encouragement around it, and also that direction. So if you, like, strictly speaking, it's very easy for somebody to say, well, look, if it's in the policy, then you follow that. But like I said earlier on, we're human first, and we also need to make space for that. So if you are finding yourself within that struggle, within that challenge, we need to, you could say, seek counsel, I suppose, would be a kind of an old-fashioned way of describing it. But you don't expect yourself to know exactly what to do each time, and for it to be very, very simple, because it is complex. So to be able to speak openly without fear of negative consequence to a manager or a mentor who is empathetic, who understands what it means to want to do your work as well as possible, but also to come from your own lived experience and to have your own values and beliefs that are valid and that are
Hmm.
important and that are a part of the conversation as well. So it is, while it is on a case by case basis, what I would suggest is to be able to open up that, or to engage in an open dialogue around this. It's not going to be a one size fits all
Yeah, of
situation.
course.
We may be affected differently at times. And also, if there is a wellbeing program, to be able to engage in that, so that you are able to speak within a space that is just about you, not about you within your working role, but
Sure.
also in this situation, I think that there can be a lot around feelings of injustice rather, and feelings of like unfairness. Is that a word? I'm just making up
Yeah,
words all over the place
it
today.
is.
But yeah,
Absolutely.
but I think that a lot of people can feel that very strongly, even physically can feel that very strongly. So that is something to open up within the space, and that's something to really, like, use the guidance of people around you who also have the experience of needing to tread that divide, but
Hmm.
also to know as well that I think that there it's okay to find it challenging. It's okay to come up
Yeah.
and don't have answers
Mm.
in the instant that you're engaging within that problem. It can be something that's ongoing, and really to you really need to speak authentically about what this is like for you
Exactly.
specifically as a person with that
Hmm.
this kind of this place
Yeah.
in your role, because it's not just work it's like I say, we're not parking any parts of us, so all of
Absolutely.
those parts are important as well.
Very good. For managers who might be listening, who are managing a team, what should they be looking out for with, from a behavior perspective or a
Mm-hmm.
communication perspective, with people on the team who they need to reiterate that they need to take time away, or they need to make sure that they need to recognize that their worldview may be changing for the
Mm-hmm.
worse, and they're getting overwhelmed and heading maybe towards burnout, because obviously managers are looking for star achievers, are people who are getting through the work faster than other people and all that, you know what I mean? And
Mm.
accuracy is good and productivity is great and all that. But when should they be kind of saying, now hold on a second, there might be, I need to talk to this person to make sure they're okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a tricky one, because you can have somebody that has an experience that's very noticeable. That like if somebody goes into what's known as hyper arousal, if they are physically activated over time and you can recognize that somebody is going through anxiety or going through panic, that's a hell of a lot easier to see compared to somebody that might be moving towards hypo arousal, which is becoming numb, becoming detached, becoming desensitized. And also within that, you know, there could be that fallacy around being desensitized as being a good thing because you're not bothered by stuff, it's not affecting you
Absolutely.
emotionally, you can move through. However, that's something that is like more subtle, but it's not healthy either.
No.
So really, it's about building that safety from a relational perspective. So obviously, you know, a manager needs to have good emotional intelligence. They also
Yeah.
need to exercise that psychological safety that I spoke about. They need to be authentic in how they engage with people. They need to promote good well-being practices by action, not just by idle chat, you know.
Of course.
And
Yeah.
there needs to be that intentional space for communication as well. So it is something that needs to be consistent. You don't want to be in a scenario where you're just reacting to things or you're getting people
Absolutely.
in dire straits and then you're trying to kind of bring them back down. Yes, there will be those points, but I think if there is that focus put on the value and the like the importance of the relationship, whether that is in a one-to-one setting or whether that is in a group setting, that will provide comfort, that will provide safety, that will provide approachability. If there also is, you know, that sense of building those positives within that working relationship as well. So we're talking about encouragement, we're talking about support, appreciation. Then you are you are kind of setting the scene for people to speak more openly because they feel more safe to speak more openly. You want to be assertive, like within, there's a difference between assertive and aggressive, by the way. So if you are being assertive, it means that you're being open, direct, honest, and respectful. So if a manager is engaging in a space where they can recognize that somebody might have worries about not reaching targets and might have worries about, you know, their job safety and all that kind of stuff. So if you can be transparent and very consistent with the message that, you know, this is okay, this is separate to us having a conversation about your well-being in work.
Exactly.
Also, you need to be mindful about stepping into that space. So you want to build that relationship first of all, but you want to really be very upfront about the fact that you care about the people, that you are, you know, you're concerned about their safety, you're concerned about their well-being. You can point to certain things that you've noticed, and like you can follow and then by providing that consistent support, but also by resourcing the person, by providing that empowerment, that agency for them to be able to seek the options that are available to them. So let's say your company has a well-being service, you are able to provide that information on a regular basis, on a consistent basis, without saying you need to go to a one-to-one or you need to go and see someone. That's very direct and almost accusatory, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you are really providing that information that you are a consistent base, that you are reliable, that you are approachable, while also allowing people to have their own agency as well.
And taking care of your own mental health.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you need to be
Absolutely.
walking that walk for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Anne, for everything today. That was super helpful. And just to reiterate, the key things we talked about, the three things I've taken is recognize the importance of self-care as a professional necessity. So it is part of your job to take care of yourself. We need to implement actionable mental health strategies. And then we need to find ways to stay informed without going into this rabbit hole, as I was doing, and being able to come out of that rabbit hole and kind of step above it and recognize if our worldview is changing.
Boundaries are key in that.
Yeah, 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 and making it a daily habit. So I had a thing for a long time where I would take care of myself on a Saturday morning for an hour and a half, which of course is ridiculous because that may not be the moment that you need taken care of. You might be
Yeah.
in good form. So it actually has to be a daily thing.
Absolutely. And when you think about all the potential experiences that you will have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and throughout,
Of course. Yeah.
there's not, and we're thinking about balance and being intentional with that balance. Listen, we need to be doing more than that. So it's about consistency. It doesn't need to be hours at a time. It's just providing that space where you can breathe, or you can step away, you can engage in joy, you can engage in nothing, because as they say, doing nothing is doing something very important.
Exactly. Thanks, Anne. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for watching and listening. We will see you again in March. Thanks a million.